All right, well, from humans designing AI to AI designing humans, that's where we are in 2026. I've been talking since early 2021 about what I call the new eugenics movement, the new eugenicists. What's funny is just a few years earlier in 2017, the community, science community around the world came out and condemned a Chinese eugenics researcher who heritable gene edited a pair of human embryos. And that's kind of completely flipped by this stage, but I forecasted it long before it happened. I said there were several motivations driving the eugenics movement, the modern eugenics movement. Money, of course, power, but also ideology, very important, prestige, and something that parallels the AI arms race. There's in every science sphere, there's a geopolitical competition, largely between China and the US, but also, countries like the UK, Israel, with bleeding edge, boundless, science questing and technology questing. And it's happening in genetics as well. What does it mean? Well, if we don't get involved, if we don't stand up, if average people don't understand what's going on and make their voices and their power heard, natural humanity itself is in danger of being a thing of the past. So I hope you enjoy this deep dive podcast created with AI, which is very interesting because, it gives a chance to see what these AIs created by Google, created by OpenAI, created by Anthropic, it's a window into the AI when you listen to this podcast, analyzing my writing. So I hope you enjoy it.
So if we go back to late 2018, the scientific world just essentially stopped spinning on its axis.
Oh, completely froze.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you had this biophysics researcher, Eugenicists, who just came out and announced he had successfully altered the genetic code of these twin baby girls, Lulu and Manna.
Using CRISPR?
Using CRISPR. And the global reaction was just, it was instantaneous and it was violently unanimous.
He was condemned by basically everyone.
Condemned by his peers, fired by his university, and, he was actually sentenced to 3 years in a Chinese prison.
Right.
Because the narrative back then was incredibly clear. Like, we do not cross the germline. We do not edit the heritable human genome. That was just this unshakable biological taboo.
It was the absolute red line.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But, okay, let's unpack this, because if you look at the landscape today, that universal outrage from just a few years ago seems like, an ancient relic.
It really does.
We are suddenly staring at this reality where the brightest minds, backed by the absolute deepest pockets in Silicon Valley, are doing exactly what put Eugenicists behind bars.
Yeah.
But now it's being sanitized. It's packaged as enhancement or climate adaptation or even biological equity.
And the sheer velocity of that shift is really what makes our material today so critical to dive into.
Right.
Because the underlying architecture of human biology is actively being repositioned. It's going from this sacred, immutable inheritance into basically a legacy software program that just, needs a patch.
Just a quick update.
Exactly. And today we're synthesizing a really tense intersection of information for you. So we have the stack of alarming, on-the-ground investigative reports from Futurism.
Which are wild, by the way.
They are. They're tracking the literal physical breaking of these biological taboos in real time. And we are cross-referencing those technical reports with a multi-year archive of work by the journalist and author Joe Doran.
Yeah, and Doran's thesis, which he's been building since, early 2021?
Yeah, early 2021. His argument is that a new eugenics mindset hasn't just, crept in from the fringes. It has fundamentally captured the highest echelons of the biogenetics industry.
And just as a quick reminder for you planning, while we're going to be talking about some intensely charged political and social concepts today, our goal is strictly to impartially report on what's in these texts.
Right, we're not endorsing this stuff.
No, not at all. We just want to help you understand these profound shifts, because the mechanisms Doran is warning about, they're no longer theoretical.
No, they're happening right now.
Right. And to understand how radical this ideological shift is, we really have to look at the hardware currently running in the labs. So Futurism recently detailed this experiment at Columbia University, led by a geneticist named Dieter Egli.
Oh, the base editing one.
Exactly. They took human zygotes of single-cell embryos and performed what is known as base editing.
Yeah.
Now, traditional CRISPR-Cas9 is essentially, it's like a pair of molecular scissors, right?
Basically, yeah. It creates a double-strand break in the DNA helix.
Right. It cuts it, and then it kind of relies on the cell's own, often really chaotic, repair mechanisms to stitch things back together.
Which is messy. But base editing is infinitely more subtle.
How so? Like, mechanically speaking.
Well, it fundamentally changes the risk profile, which is actually why it's accelerating the timeline so much. Instead of severing the whole double helix, base editing uses a modified, sort of catalytically impaired CRISPR protein.
Okay.
And it's tethered to an enzyme called a deaminase. So it targets a really highly specific location, opens the DNA strand just slightly, and chemically converts a single letter of the genetic code into another.
Literally just swapping a letter.
Exactly. For instance, it chemically rearranges the atoms in a cytosine base to turn it into a uracil, which the cell then eventually reads as a thymine.
Wow.
Yeah, so you are rewriting the genetic text one letter at a time without actually snapping the structural spine of the DNA.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And in this Columbia experiment, they successfully targeted genes that are related to cholesterol management and hemoglobin production.
Right.
But, you know, when I was reading this study, I kept looking for the therapeutic justification. And it simply wasn't there.
No, it was...
They weren't trying to cure a lethal congenital defect in these specific embryos. The entire endeavor was essentially just a proof of concept.
It was a flex.
It was a flex. It was to demonstrate that base editing in human embryos is viable and that it sidesteps that catastrophic chromosomal shredding that the earlier CRISPR models caused.
And what's fascinating here is what Alexis Comore said about this. She's one of the pioneering researchers who actually helped develop base editing technology.
Oh, right. She was interviewed by Scientific American, wasn't she?
She was. And her assessment of this specific Columbia experiment was blunt. She literally said, the cat's out of the bag.
Just like that.
Yeah. Comore explicitly noted that Eagly's team basically shattered this long-standing gentleman's agreement within the global scientific community.
Because, I mean, the United States lacks strict, codified regulatory oversight for, like, privately funded, non-implanted embryo research, right?
Exactly. So this Columbia study is effectively serving as an open-source manual for biological enhancement.
But, okay, let me just challenge the sheer panic around this for a second.
Sure.
Because if you are eventually going to use base editing to eliminate something horrific, like Huntington's disease, you have to run proof of concept trials first, don't you?
Well, scientifically, yes.
Like, you have to ensure the chemical conversion actually works. So is improving the safety of the mechanism a necessary, even ethical first step before you ever attempt a therapeutic application?
I see what you're saying.
Why do we have to default to assuming a laboratory flex is an automatic gateway to designer babies?
That's a fair question. But the problem is the concept of safety in germline editing is kind of a biological illusion, at least with our current understanding of how cells divide.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, the futurism reporting dives really heavily into this phenomenon known as mosaicism.
Mosaicism, like a mosaic tile.
Exactly like that. When you apply that deaminase enzyme to a single-cell zygote, you need that precise edit to replicate flawlessly as the zygote divides. From 1 cell to 2, then 4, 8, 16.
Right, all the way up to the trillions of cells in a human body.
Right. But biological systems are incredibly noisy. The edit rarely takes with uniform perfection across the board.
Oh, I see.
So you end up with a mosaic embryo. It's a patchwork where some cellular lineages carry the edited genetic code and other lineages retain the unedited code.
Or they might even have, like, unintended mutations that just popped up during the division process.
Exactly.
Which introduces this terrifying ticking time bomb scenario.
Yeah, it really does.
Because a mosaic embryo might look perfectly healthy under a microscope on, say, day 5 in a petri dish.
Oh, absolutely.
But the cascading systemic failures like an autoimmune collapse or some neurological misfire, sudden organ failure, those things might not manifest until that child is 3 years old, or 12, or 30.
And that's the ethical nightmare. You are bypassing the concept of informed consent entirely. You're treating a future conscious human being as a beta test for a chemical procedure.
Right.
And this staggering risk profile brings us to probably the most alarming aspect of the futurism investigations.
Yeah, offshore stuff.
Yes, yes. The ethical guardrails that theoretically prevent this kind of human beta testing, they are being actively bypassed right now by this clandestine ecosystem of offshore startups.
And it's fueled by staggering amounts of Silicon Valley capital. Like the tech ethos of move fast and break things is literally transitioning from software code to the human germline.
Yeah, futurism highlighted this one startup called Preventive. Right, and because the FDA strictly bans germline editing for commercial human trials inside the United States, Preventive is reportedly operating in the shadows, totally outside U.S. jurisdiction.
And their stated goal is wild. They want to gene hack a human baby to erase a hereditary disease.
That's the claim.
And the financial backing here isn't, fringe capital. We are talking about major tech powerhouses, people like OpenAI CEO Sam Altman and Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong.
And preventative is really just the tip of the spear. The sources show we are witnessing the rapid formation of a whole parallel biological industry.
Yeah, you have companies like Nucleus offering advanced genomic screening directly to consumers, and startups like Harrisite, who are aggressively marketing their ability to predict the future IQ of an IVF embryo before it's even implanted.
And that right there is the pivot. That transition from screening out a terminal disease to screening for subjective traits like intelligence, that's a massive escalation.
It's exactly what the reporting suggests Elon Musk and Neuralink director Siobhan Zillis engaged in.
Yeah, according to the sources, they allegedly utilized a company called Orchid Health to screen their embryos.
Oh, right. And they weren't merely filtering for illnesses. They allegedly employed these bespoke algorithms to identify the specific embryos that scored highest for superior cognitive function.
But the scientific audacity of that process really requires some serious scrutiny. Because to screen an IVF embryo, a clinician has to extract just a tiny handful of cells.
Like how many?
Usually around 5 to 10 cells from the outer layer of the blastocyst. And from those 5 cells, these companies claim they can sequence the entire genome.
Just 5 cells.
Yeah. And Stanford genetic specialist Svetlana Yatsenko is quoted in the text issuing a very severe warning about the actual physics of this process.
Because of the amplification. Right?
Exactly. To get enough DNA to actually read from just 5 cells, you have to use a process called whole genome amplification.
So this is essentially PCR, right? The polymerase chain reaction.
Basically, yes.
So you use thermal cycling to separate the DNA strands, you bind primers to them, and then you use a polymerase enzyme to build a new strand. And you do this dozens of times to turn this microscopic trace of DNA into millions of copies, just so the sequencing machines can actually read it.
Precisely. But here's the catch. Polymerase enzymes are not perfect copying machines.
They make typos.
They introduce errors, incorporating the wrong nucleotide base during the synthesis phase, and if an error happens in, say, cycle 2.
Oh, wow. Then that error is exponentially amplified in every single subsequent cycle.
Exactly, which is why Yatsenko characterizes relying on this highly noisy, amplified data to make critical decisions about a human life as playing Russian roulette.
Because you could easily discard a perfectly healthy embryo just because the amplification process introduced a phantom mutation.
Yes, or even more devastatingly, you could select an embryo that actually harbors severe, complex genetic defects, but those defects were masked by the amplification noise.
That is, you have the wealthiest individuals on the planet playing statistical roulette with embryonic DNA just to eke out a few extra points of algorithmic IQ.
It's hubris on a massive scale.
Which really begs the question, right? If these technocrats believe human biology is basically a legacy code base that desperately needs an update, we really have to look closely at their underlying philosophy.
We do.
Like, why do they feel they have the moral authority to initiate these patches? And this is where Joe Doran's extensive framework becomes really indispensable.
Yeah, Doran argues that this isn't just about, scientific curiosity. It is a fundamental shift in how the elite perceive reality itself.
Right. So his 2021 essays trace this profound philosophical divergence. He actually builds on the work of philosophers like Matthew Liu and David Lochterman to define this modern, technocratic worldview.
It's a fascinating comparison because for centuries, the entire enterprise of science was purely observational.
Right. You're trying to understand an immutable, pre-existing material reality.
Exactly. You studied the rotation of the planets to understand gravity. You didn't attempt to redesign the solar system.
The material world was fixed, and the human mind basically had to conform to it.
But Doran points out that modern data-driven science has completely inverted that relationship.
Yeah. The goal is no longer to conform the mind to reality, but to force material reality to conform to the abstract models generated by the mind.
And that inversion completely obliterates the concept of the natural.
How so?
Well, in the technocratic framework, there is no intrinsic human nature. There is no sacred biological architecture. A human being is merely raw material.
Just an arbitrary arrangement of molecules.
Yes, waiting to be optimized by human will and advanced technology.
Doran actually illustrates this with an incredibly sharp distinction between a master craftsman and a modern data modeler. I thought this was such a great analogy.
Oh, the carpenter analogy, it's brilliant.
Right. So if you are a carpenter working with oak or, a metallurgist working with steel, you are forced to respect the physical limits of your medium.
Mm-hmm.
If you attempt to bend a piece of timber against its grain, what happens? It splinters.
The material pushes back.
Exactly. The material provides friction. It asserts its own reality. But if you spend your entire professional existence architecting software and manipulating data models, you never experience that material friction.
Right, because if a line of code doesn't execute the way you want, you just highlight it, delete it, and write a new one.
Reality, in the digital realm, is infinitely malleable. And Doran argues that the individuals who are funding and driving this biogenetics industry, they look at the human genome and they see nothing more than poorly optimized code.
They don't perceive biological limits. They only see engineering problems.
And this disconnects from material friction. Doran says it breeds what he describes as the hubris of unbounded power.
Yeah, because throughout history, the elite justified their dominance through abstract claims, right? Divine right, royal bloodlines, vast land ownership.
Sure.
But the new technocratic elite, they are pursuing literal biological godlike powers. The objectives aren't just wealth accumulation anymore. They are indefinite life extension, radical cognitive enhancement, and the absolute granular control of their own evolutionary trajectory.
And Doran connects this exact mindset to the broader societal trends we're seeing accelerate today.
Yeah.
Like, he views the push for transhumanism, the mainstreaming of gender fluidity, and the heavy reliance on abstract algorithmic predictive modeling during the COVID-19 pandemic as symptoms of the exact same phenomena.
Right. And the underlying assumption uniting all of them, according to Doran, is that physical, biological reality is merely a suggestion. It's a rough draft that technology and willpower can seamlessly override.
Now, it's really crucial to contrast Doran's sociological warnings here with the aggressive optimism coming from the actual scientists who are engineering these tools.
Oh, absolutely. The contrast is stark.
Like, take Jennifer Doudna, right? The Nobel laureate who co-created CRISPR. In her public discourse, she frames gene editing as this almost utopian panacea.
Yeah, she suggests CRISPR will effortlessly solve global hunger through hyper-resilient engineered crops. It'll eradicate all genetic disease and even serve as the primary mechanism to reverse climate change.
But doesn't Doudna's optimism kind of stem from the sheer utility of the tool she helped invent?
How do you mean?
Well, if you possess a mechanism capable of immunizing entire populations against malaria or designing drought-resistant wheat, wouldn't focusing on the catastrophic risks seem almost negligent compared to the immediate suffering you could alleviate?
I hear that. But the danger, according to Doran's analysis, is that this blinding tech optimism fundamentally ignores the complexity of interconnected biological systems. Doudna heavily downplays existential risks, and Doran specifically points out her swift dismissal of the heavily debated hypothesis that the SARS-CoV-2 virus may have originated from gain-of-function research in a laboratory.
Right.
For the new eugenicists, the potential for a species-level engineering disaster is treated as a minor, manageable speed bump, because their core ideology dictates that any problem caused by technology can simply be solved by deploying, well, more technology.
Just patch the patch.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. If they're going to treat the human genome like a flawed code base, they quickly realize they can't rewrite it manually.
No, it's way too complex.
Right. Complex human traits are not controlled by a single typographical error in the DNA. Which brings us to the heavy machinery of the new eugenics. We really need to explore polygenic risk scores, or PRS.
Because this is the computational engine driving the entire embryo selection industry right now.
Exactly. So to grasp PRS, we kind of have to move beyond Mendelian genetics.
Right, the simple stuff you learn in high school biology.
Yeah, like a condition like cystic fibrosis is monogenic, meaning it's driven by a mutation in a single specific gene.
If you have the mutation, you have the disease. It's a binary switch.
But the traits, the biogenetics industry is truly interested in longevity, cardiac resilience, height, and especially intelligence. Those are polygenic.
They are influenced by tens of thousands, sometimes millions, of minute genetic variants scattered across the entire genome.
And they're all interacting in incredibly complex, often really poorly understood ways.
So it's helpful to think of a polygenic risk score, like a highly complex financial derivative.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
You aren't just looking at the performance of one bad stock. You are running an algorithm that analyzes a portfolio of millions of microfluctuations to calculate an overall risk profile.
Right, so the algorithm looks at the sequenced DNA of an embryo and generates this statistical probability. It says, based on these 1.5 million data points, embryo A has a 22% lower statistical probability of developing type 2 diabetes and a 14% higher probability of possessing cognitive function in the top decile.
And this framework is already being deployed commercially.
It's not science fiction.
No, the sources highlight the case of Aria. She's a 16-month-old child whose parents utilized a company called Genomic Prediction to screen her as an embryo.
And Genomic Prediction was co-founded by Stephen Su, right?
Yes. He's a physicist who has been remarkably transparent about his ultimate goal of using PRS to select for profound intellectual capability.
Wow.
Now, Aria's parents officially use the technology to screen for health markers, but the infrastructure to filter for cognitive traits is actively being built and refined right now.
And organizations like the Center for Genetics in Society are raising massive red flags about this whole trajectory.
Oh, huge red flags.
Because they argue that PRS isn't just about individual health. It's about encoding socioeconomic advantage directly into human biology.
Think about it. If advanced polygenic screening costs tens of thousands of dollars, it will exclusively be utilized by the wealthy.
Exactly. So over a few generations, you aren't just exacerbating a financial class divide. You are engineering a permanent, insurmountable biological caste system.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Humans alone cannot process the millions of interacting variables required to make PRS, or future complex gene editing, truly accurate.
The math is just too big.
The mathematics are simply too vast. So this necessitates the convergence of gene editing with artificial intelligence.
Oh, right.
The sources document how the Oak Ridge National Laboratory is deploying Summit, which is one of the world's most powerful supercomputers, to map and decode the deep structure of human proteins.
And concurrently, you have the NIH initiating this $130 million project called Bridge to AI. And that's specifically designed to generate massive machine-readable data sets that link genetic variants to physiological outcomes.
But the most profound development here probably comes from NVIDIA.
The AI chip manufacturer.
Right. They're developing these language models called BioNeMo.
Okay, so think about how an AI like ChatGPT works.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually understand English, right?
No, it tokenizes words. It uses billions of parameters to statistically predict which word should logically follow the last one.
Which allows it to write coherent essays. So BioNeMo does the exact same thing. But instead of tokenizing English vocabulary, it tokenizes the A, C, T, and G nucleotide bases of DNA and the amino acid sequences of proteins.
And by reading the genome like a language, these biological large language models can perceive multidimensional patterns and secondary folding structures that human scientists are physically incapable of visualizing.
That is wild.
If we extrapolate this trajectory, we are rapidly approaching a biological singularity.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning we are building AI systems that will soon possess an understanding of genomic architecture so vastly superior to our own that we will inevitably hand over the reins.
We will just task autonomous AI networks with redesigning human DNA to achieve specific outcomes.
Yes, relying on algorithms whose decision-making processes we can no longer even decode.
So we are essentially designing machines to design better humans.
It is an extraordinary feedback loop.
But okay, a glaring tactical question remains here.
What's that?
If this technology harbors such immense societal and existential risk, how are these technocrats convincing the global public to let them deploy it? I mean, you don't launch a global eugenics program by announcing a desire to breed supergeniuses.
No, you definitely don't. You deploy the technology through the ultimate Trojan horse, the eradication of undeniable human suffering.
Okay.
And to understand how this works, we must clearly define the barrier between somatic gene therapy and heritable genome editing, or HGE.
Okay, so somatic therapy is contained. If an adult patient is suffering from sickle cell anemia, scientists extract their bone marrow stem cells, use CRISPR to edit the hemoglobin gene, and then infuse those edited cells back into the patient.
The therapy retrofits the individual.
But those edits do not alter the patient's sperm or eggs. The genetic changes stop with them.
Exactly. Heritable genome editing, conversely, alters the germline. By editing an embryo, you are making a permanent, fundamental change to the human gene pool that will be passed down to that child, their children, and literally every generation that follows.
And curing a devastating condition like sickle cell or Huntington's is the ethical wedge used to normalize HGE.
It is. As Doran rightly observes, it is incredibly difficult to mount a public relations campaign against a technology that promises to end generational suffering.
Yeah, I mean, you stand before a grieving family and say, we have the precise tool to ensure your lineage never experiences this pain again. Nobody wants to argue for the preservation of a lethal disease.
But the moment you accept that the germline can be edited to prevent harm, the definition of what constitutes a malady begins to expand exponentially.
Right. If we can edit out cystic fibrosis, why not edit out a genetic predisposition for obesity?
Or why not edit out a propensity for depression?
And shockingly, the sources reveal that the justification has already expanded far beyond individual health. It's bleeding directly into the climate crisis.
The documentation on this is surreal. In 2017, the AMA Journal of Ethics published a serious academic paper proposing that editing the human genome to adapt to climate change might not just be an option, but a moral imperative.
Wait, really? A moral imperative?
Yes. Bioethicist Matthew Liao went on record proposing that humans could be genetically engineered to be allergic to meat as a mechanism to force a reduction in agricultural carbon emissions.
Okay, I really want to break down exactly what Liao is proposing here, because it perfectly highlights the sheer mechanical absurdity of the technocratic mindset.
Please do.
So he suggested mimicking the effects of the Lone Star tick.
Like the actual bug.
Yes, the tick. So when a Lone Star tick bites a human, it transmits this sugar molecule called alpha-gal. Galactose alpha 1-3-galactose.
Okay.
Now, humans don't naturally produce this carbohydrate, but mammals like cows and pigs do.
Right.
The tick bite triggers the human immune system to produce a massive wave of antibodies against alpha-gal. Consequently, if that person ever eats red meat again, their immune system launches a severe, potentially life-threatening allergic reaction.
Wow.
So Liao is suggesting we just bypass the tick and use gene editing to permanently encode that biological intolerance into the human species.
That perfectly encapsulates Doran's thesis regarding the obliteration of the natural.
Yeah, it's wild.
Think about it. Faced with an environmental crisis driven by systemic industrial practices, the technocrat does not propose altering the industrial system or accepting limitations on consumption.
No.
Instead, they view the human being, our natural biology, and our dietary history as the defective variable that requires an engineering solution. The environment is fixed, the human must be modified.
And we see this identical logic funded at a massive scale with Colossal Biosciences, which is a de-extinction company operating with financial backing from the CIA.
Oh, right, the woolly mammoths.
Yes. Their flagship project is an attempt to use CRISPR to splice woolly mammoth DNA into the genome of the modern Asian elephant.
And the scientific rationale they provide is deeply tied to climate mitigation.
Right. The theory is that if they can engineer this cold-adapted mammoth-elephant hybrid, they can release herds of them into the Arctic tundra.
And these massive bioengineered creatures will trample the snow, knock down trees, and theoretically restore the ancient mammoth steppe ecosystem.
By keeping the ground exposed to freezing temperatures, they prevent the permafrost from melting and releasing massive reserves of trapped methane gas.
It is planetary-scale geoengineering utilizing synthetic biology.
But think about the implication here. If the scientific community and the political establishment are willing to accept the genetic engineering of an elephant to manipulate atmospheric methane, the intellectual leap required to justify engineering a human being to lower their individual carbon footprint is terrifyingly small.
Exactly. Which brings us to a concept Doran refers to as the ethical offspring movement.
Okay, unpack that for us.
Doran predicts that within a very short time frame, heritable genome editing will cease to be framed as an elite luxury. It will be aggressively rebranded as a civic duty.
A duty.
Yes. The narrative will dictate that bringing an unedited natural child into the world is an act of supreme selfishness.
Wow.
You will be expected to utilize CRISPR and AI to ensure your child possesses maximum viral resistance, optimal biological equity, and an artificially suppressed environmental footprint, all for the greater good of the collective.
So what does this all mean? Once genetic optimization is established as a moral imperative for planetary survival, it transitions from the realm of private bioethics directly into state mandate.
Yep.
And Doran uses a fascinating term for this, genetic legislation. How exactly does a government legislate the genome?
Well, you have to think about how power operates today. Currently, governments regulate human behavior externally. We impose speed limits, tax codes, and zoning laws.
Right.
But human beings possess autonomy. You can choose to press the accelerator and violate the speed limit. You will face legal consequences, but the physical choice remains yours.
Sure.
Genetic legislation removes the capacity for choice entirely. The law is literally coded into your cellular architecture.
So if the state determines that resource scarcity requires a lower population, they don't implement a political one-child policy.
No.
They mandate a heritable genetic edit that uniformly reduces human fertility by 20%.
Or if a novel virus emerges, they don't issue lockdown orders. They deploy an autonomous AI to architect a genetic patch for the immune system and mandate its integration.
Because you cannot protest a law that is structurally woven into your own DNA.
Exactly. And Doran makes a highly controversial yet structurally vital connection here. He argues that the global response to the COVID-19 pandemic served as a psychological beta test for genetic legislation.
Okay, wait, walk me through that.
Well, analyzing his specific sociological framework, Doran posits that the sweeping mRNA vaccine mandates successfully dismantled the traditional Western boundaries of bodily autonomy.
So to be precise, he is suggesting that the mandates established a massive political precedent. The idea that the state possesses the authority to compel an individual to accept a novel, genetically active therapeutic using the justification that their unmodified biological state is a threat to the wider community.
Exactly. Doran argues that if the global population accepts the premise that their natural immune system is a public hazard requiring a mandated pharmaceutical patch to participate in society, then the psychological barrier against mandated heritable genome editing has already fallen.
So the jump from compelling a somatic mRNA treatment today to compelling germline edits to protect the collective genetic health of the population tomorrow is merely a matter of technological scale, not a shift in underlying principle.
Right. And there is a highly organized political infrastructure actively lobbying for this exact future right now.
You're talking about the Transhumanist Party.
Yes. The sources detail their rise, and this isn't just some internet subculture. They have drafted a formal Bill of Rights.
But it completely subverts traditional constitutional rights, doesn't it?
Completely. They aren't advocating for freedom of speech or assembly. They are demanding morphological freedom.
Morphological freedom, meaning the freedom to change your form.
Exactly. The transhumanist platform is built on an absolute rejection of the human condition. They view biological aging, disease, and the inevitability of death not as fundamental aspects of the human experience, but as engineering flaws that must be eradicated.
And their explicit goal is to achieve escape velocity from death by merging human consciousness with artificial intelligence and entirely rewriting our biological substrate.
But morphological freedom for the individual quickly becomes a tool for total optimization by the state.
Mm-hmm.
And Doran seamlessly links this drive for internal biological control with the rapid expansion of external eco-surveillance. The technocrats want to monitor the system at every conceivable level.
Yeah, and you see this external tracking expanding globally. The sources point to the ultra-low emission zones, the ULEZ in the United Kingdom.
Oh, the traffic cameras.
Right. It's this incredibly granular system of camera networks that track the movements of older vehicles, autonomously charging citizens a tax based on the emissions generated just by leaving their driveways.
Which is then coupled with the intense push for central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs.
Right, because a fully implemented CBDC isn't just digital money, it is programmable money. It grants a central authority the ability to track every single financial transaction in real time, with the theoretical capability to automatically block a purchase, say, a plane ticket or a cut of meat, if a citizen's algorithmically determined carbon allowance has been exceeded.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Doran contextualizes all of this through Klaus Schwab's heavily publicized concept of total transparency.
What does that entail?
The modern elite demand an ecosystem of absolute surveillance to optimize global society. They require continuous data streams detailing your digital communications, your financial velocity, your carbon output, and ultimately the microscopic code of your biology. Nothing can remain opaque to the models.
But the pursuit of a perfectly optimized, entirely predictable, transparent society inevitably runs headlong into the most volatile, fiercely independent, and profoundly natural institution in human history.
The family.
The family. The final and perhaps most disturbing phase of this deep dive is the technological deconstruction of natural reproduction.
And the scientific milestones achieved in just the past few years here are staggering.
Yeah.
Researchers at Barlin University in Israel have successfully engineered lab-grown synthetic testicles capable of producing sperm.
Seriously?
Yes. And in Japan, scientists utilized induced pluripotent stem cells, so they took normal skin cells from a male mouse, reprogrammed them back to an embryonic state, and coerced them to develop into fully functional egg cells.
That is insane. And we are already seeing the clinical application of mitochondrial replacement therapy in the UK, resulting in children legally and biologically born with the DNA of 3 distinct parents.
Right. We are crossing a threshold where the creation of human life is being entirely decoupled from the physical union of a man and a woman.
And increasingly decoupled from the human body itself via the development of artificial wombs.
And this decoupling is being enthusiastically embraced by movements like the pronatalists, spearheaded by figures such as Malcolm and Simone Collins.
Driven by an intense anxiety over global demographic collapse, right? Exactly. They are openly advocating for the industrialization of reproduction. They champion using IVF and advanced polygenic screening to aggressively select embryos for high intelligence and specific behavioral traits.
Basically attempting to engineer a resilient, hyper-capable future workforce just to maintain societal structures.
Yeah.
So we have to ask the ultimate question regarding Doran's framework here. Why does the technocratic state, or this elite class, possess such an intense underlying hostility toward the traditional family structure?
It's a great question.
Why invest billions to synthesize reproduction and muddy the genetic lineage of a child with 4 different engineered donors?
Because the natural family is the ultimate source of friction against total state optimization. Doran's logic is cold and undeniably historical. The deepest, most visceral allegiance a human being forms is to their blood, to their children, their parents, their kin. It is an evolutionary, soul-deep bond that precedes and eclipses any loyalty to a government, an ideology, or a data model.
Right. That biological bond creates a fierce, irrational protective instinct. A mother or a father will defy any tax, break any law, and dismantle any state mandate if they believe it threatens the survival or freedom of their child. The natural family is a fortress of private loyalty.
Precisely. And to an elite class trying to architect a perfectly compliant, frictionless society, that intense private loyalty is a profound threat.
So if you can leverage synthetic reproduction to manufacture humans who lack traditional familial ties.
If a child is gestated in a synthetic womb using genetic material curated and authorized by a state algorithm, you sever that primal bond.
The child's existence is owed to the system.
Yes, their loyalty defaults to the state that engineered them, rather than to a mother or father who would fiercely defend them against that very state.
And this isn't just sociological speculation. It has terrifying military applications.
Oh, absolutely. The sources note that both Vladimir Putin and the prominent UK geneticist Robin Lovell-Badge have publicly referenced the theoretical development of genetically engineered super soldiers.
Think about the horrific calculus of war for a second. The greatest political constraint a leader faces when launching a conflict is the resistance of parents who refuse to send their sons and daughters to die.
Right.
But if you can engineer a battalion of soldiers who possess no parents, no family ties, and no natural lineage, you entirely remove the messy, emotional humanity from the equation of war.
It represents the absolute commodification of human existence. In the span of a century, the paradigm shifts from viewing human beings as entities endowed with inherent natural rights to viewing them as programmable products manufactured to precise state or corporate specifications.
The sheer scope of what we've unpacked today is, it's difficult to process. Let's just recap the velocity of this shift. We began by examining how rapidly the scientific consensus evaporated. We moved from the universal absolute condemnation of Eugenicists' CRISPR experiments to a reality where Columbia University is base editing embryos, Silicon Valley billionaires are running offshore gene-hacking startups, and the CIA is funding mammoth de-extinction.
All accelerating toward a biological singularity driven by AI.
Exactly.
And the core conflict we've mapped out today is the monumental collision between 2 powerful forces.
Right.
On one hand, you have the profound, deeply compassionate human desire to harness technology to eradicate devastating diseases and alleviate generational suffering.
Which everyone wants.
Which everyone wants. But colliding with that is the boundless hubris of a technocratic elite. They have adopted a new eugenics mindset that views the natural world, the human genome, and human nature itself not as an inheritance to be respected, but as a deeply flawed code base that they have the unique moral authority and the technological mandate to debug and redesign.
As we conclude this deep dive, we want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to chew on.
Yeah.
We've spent this time dissecting the mechanics of base editing, the computational power of biological AI, and the geopolitical implications of genetic legislation. But beneath all the technical jargon and sociological frameworks, there is a fundamental philosophical question that these technocrats seem terrifyingly unequipped to answer.
If we succeed in this grand engineering project, if we utilize heritable genome editing and AI to systematically erase every vulnerability, if we edit away our susceptibility to disease, our environmental friction, and optimize out all our subjective biological flaws to perfectly integrate into a sterile, frictionless system, do we inadvertently edit out the essence of humanity?
Yeah.
The struggles, the empathy, the vulnerability, and the messy, fierce natural bonds are what forge the human experience. If we transform ourselves into perfectly optimized biological machines, what happens to the human soul?
Right. If the human genome really is an ancient, delicate manuscript written by billions of years of survival, and we hand the technocrats a red pen to simply erase all the tragedy, do we inevitably erase the poetry right along with it? We've moved from utilizing science as a magnifying glass to understand the universe, to wielding it as a weapon to conquer our own biology, arrogantly assuming we possess the wisdom, redraw the blueprint of existence. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the consensus, keep looking past the sterile data models, and keep exploring these profoundly crucial topics.